Good day and thank you for joining CivilNet. Today we'll be speaking with Lerna Ekmekcioglu, Associate Professor of History and Women's Studies at the Massachusetts Institute of Technologies. Lerna is also the author of the book Recovering Armenia. Lerna, thank you for joining us.
Hi.
And Lerna, my first question, how did you find your heroine, someone like Hayganush Mark, who was so outspoken and yet forgotten by Armenians and Turks alike?
Yes, it was in 1998 that I first encountered this woman, Hayganush Mark, with whom I spent more than a decade, really, studying, examining, and writing. It was actually in Istanbul, in the offices of Agos newspaper. I was a college student then, and together with my friends from the same college in Istanbul, that we had an Armenian feminist group, and we were kind of helped by Agos people, and one of them was Gobelian, who since passed away, and he gave us this book called Hayganush Mark Young Korda, which was published in 1954. This was the first time that I've heard that this woman existed, and then this woman, in fact, published a feminist journal for 13 continuous years in Istanbul, in a place that's close to where I used to live. So when Yervant Gobelyan presented this book to us, this new generation of young feminist women, we were really amazed, and we immediately read the book, which does include her short autobiography and some selections from her published work from previous.
And was it easy to do more research on her? Were there preserved archives, accessible archives?
Yes, the first thing was, of course, we wanted to reach the whole collection of Haygin. Haygin was the journal that Hayganush Mark edited from 1919 to 1933 in Istanbul. Obviously, the first archive that we could reach in order to understand what this movement of Armenian feminism in post-genocide Turkey, in early Turkish Republic, would be to look at the whole run of Haygin. But it is not found in its homeland, so to speak. The collection of Haygin we couldn't find in Istanbul. We were able to reach a few issues of Haygin from the Armenian Patriarchate Library, as well as from some people, older generation of Armenians, who saved some of these issues. Where I found the whole collection was in the Haygazian Library of Beirut in Armenia, Haygazian University's library in Beirut. They were very generous. By this time, I already started my PhD process at NYU. So NYU arranged for Haygazian University to digitize the whole collection of Haygin and purchase them for the NYU libraries. So it's also in Armenia. Later on, I also recognized that even though it's not the whole collection, most issues are also in Armenia.
And how was something so outspoken like Haygin perceived by the Armenian society and also the Turkish society, given that it spoke so loudly about sexual liberation, women's rights?
Initially, it was daring, but when the timing of its beginning is very important. This is post World War I, capital of the Ottoman Empire that is defeated by the Allied forces. They occupy the Haygin was born in occupied Constantinople, and it left such a big mark on it. This was an environment of real freedom, an atmosphere of freedom, as they would call it. Azadutyan Mutnunort, this is constantly emphasized. Even though there was some censorship, still they could express themselves because they thought allies were on their side. And there is this is something that I've covered in my book extensively. There's this moment of, yes, we have been through a lot. This whole catastrophe injured us, but we are going to recover. We are going to survive as Armenians. And this is both desperate, but at the same time hopeful, that we are going to establish this new greater Armenia all together. and that women have a certain part to do in this political project. Okay, they are going to be the mothers of the new nation, of the recovered nation. They are going to give birth to multiple children because we need to populate the new land, especially after this the genocide. And that we also need women's activism as lobbyists, as contributors, financial contributors to the agenda, to the national agenda, wherever. So in this atmosphere of necessity for everyone's labor, Haygin and Hayganush Mark's explicitly feminist goals are welcomed by the community. By the Armenian community, actually worldwide, it is welcome.
And about this dual role, the all-embracing woman who will continue doing housework and have children and yet demands to be included in society in all its aspects, why such emphasis?
The way I see it is that this is a very opportune moment for the feminists. One thing we need to understand is that this is not the beginning of Armenian feminism at all. Beginning in early 1880s, Armenian women in Istanbul, in Tbilisi, in Cairo, they began publishing stuff, organizing into different kind of institutions to expand the limits of what was then deemed as possible for Armenian women. Okay, so by the time that we reach 1990s, there's this history and experience of challenging the accepted norms or what is seen as a woman's work. Okay, so but everything is more intensified in this immediate moment of post-genocide, and when the future seems a future national sovereignty consolidated in this thing called Greater Armenia seems plausible. 1919, it's very early on. Feminists think that now it's their time to perform their traditionally female duties to the nation. Yes, they'll mother the nation. Yes, they'll take care of the children. Yes, they'll socialize them into Armenianness, patriotic Armenianness. But in response, and this is a reciprocal thinking, in response, they want to also take part into governing mechanisms of the nation, that they want to have their voices heard in the future planning activities of the nation, ask however they conceived it. For instance, in Istanbul, they wanted to partake in the Armenian National Assembly, Askain Jogov, that was the parliament for Armenians in Istanbul, because women were not allowed to partake in that assembly. And when they make that argument, and Haygin was the leader of that argument, they kept saying that you can't ask us to be traditional without giving us something back that is going to be seen as radical at this moment, but in fact, it's something that will benefit the nation. If we have women's voices, the nation will be a better nation.
And Lerna, when did this hopeful period come to an end, and did it coincide with the magazine being closed?
No, it ended way earlier than that. It ended about a decade earlier than that. It ended with the burning of Izmir by the Kemalist forces. Perhaps even earlier, but I can see, I read the press of the Istanbul Armenian community at this time period, and this moment of Izmir, Kemalist victory over Izmir seems to have sent a very strong message to Armenians in Istanbul that it's over, that allies will not come to our help, that potentially British will flee, and maybe the catastrophe that befell Izmir will be repeated in Istanbul. So after that moment, many Armenian intellectuals, activists who collaborated with the allies and worked for the establishment of Armenia left the city, escaped the city, and the ones who remained had to change their discourse. So after the fall of 1922, you don't see anything in Haygin that's going to mention this any kind of secessionist territorial hopeful. It's the opposite. It's more turning back into itself. The community seems to be more not just disappointed. Everyone was disappointed, but also scared and tamed. It starts taming itself because they can anticipate what's going to happen to them, given how they will be accused of betrayal by the Turkish government. So after the signing of the Lausanne Treaty in 1923 and the establishment of the Turkish Republic, that hopeful moment is gone.
And I wonder what Hayganush Mark did after Haygin was shut down. Did she continue working actively?
After 1923, when the Turkish government closed down Haygin, Hayganush Mark is extremely traumatized. She never had children. She considered Haygin to be her daughter. And Haygin was 13 years old. So she considers this as a cursed number, 13. She was not, and it came to her as a surprise. So it was shocking that, because the very last issue, you can see that she even anticipates that it's going to be closed, even though they do have financial problems. She cannot hold a pen for a few years. She even responds to friends' letters with pencil. I think this is kind of her protesting the whole process. Then she returned. Her husband, Vahan Toshigyan, was an influential editor, somewhat a controversial figure because of her political perspective. He was publishing a newspaper, Noror, in Istanbul. She first has some sections in Noror where she tries to highlight women's movement still, women's needs, women's demands in the Armenian community, but she doesn't attract that much attention anymore. Like, she now is seen as derivative, not the main thing. Vahan Toshigyan is in this power intellectual couple, he is the one who is the leader. Then she stops, but she's still very active. She continues an active life in the Armenian community, gives talks about her comrades, other feminists, both in the past and contemporary living feminists of her time.
And one last question, what's the subject of your next research? What should we expect?
Yeah, this first book, Recovering Armenia, has two parts. One pertains to this 1918 to 1922-23 period, and the other one is post-1923 Turkey, up until mid-1930s. So in my second, this is my second book project, the one that I just published, because together with my friend Melissa Bilal, we did publish a book which was about the history of Armenian feminism. We translated Armenian feminists' work from Ottoman Turkish or Turkish from Armenian to Turkish, and published it in Istanbul in 2006. So this was an edited volume called Bir Adalet Feryadı. We are hoping to translate it into English, hopefully expand it. It can be my third book project, something with Melissa Bilal, again, a source book of Armenian women's history, because there are so many names that we recovered in the last decade that have been active participants of Armenian history. They even published memoirs, but because still Armenian historiography is very gender blind, we don't know about them. We know the male characters, we don't know the female characters. Hayganush Mark is just one of them, and because of Haygin, she did leave us a huge archive, but there were others as well. So one of my goals is to make these other women more visible to the historiography.
Thank you, Lerna, so much for joining us. This was very interesting and inspiring, and we'll be looking forward to your next project.
Great. Thank you so much.